All right, guys, today we are learning volume of rectangular prisms and cylinders. I actually think this is a lesson that goes pretty smoothly usually. Sorry I can't be there today. But we're going to use two formulas predominantly in the whole lesson, and there will be some drawing of pictures, so I'll make sure to draw those out for you guys. So starting with our prisms. So we have a rectangular prism. And in that prism, when we want to find the volume, we have a general formula. And that general formula, we have to use the area of one of our bases. So we have this base right here. And if we wanted to find just the area of that base, we would say we're going to find base times height. But because we want to fill up this whole rectangular prism, so it'd be like we were filling it up with water, we'd be filling in the entire prism, we have to actually include our length in the volume. So when we include the length, our actual formula becomes volume equals length. We're going to change that base to a width, and then we're going to keep the h for height. So that actually helps us find the total volume of the figure because it includes the area of the side base times the area of the front base, and that tells us that we can fill this whole figure up with a liquid, or let's say we wanted to fill it with rice. So we're finding the actual what we can put inside that container. So if we look at one that has some numbers on it, we're going to identify the length, the width, and the height. So we can see here that our length is 8 centimeters, our width is 10 centimeters, and our height is 23 centimeters. So when I put that into my formula, volume equals length times width times height. Volume equals, use parentheses here, length is 8, width is 10, and our height is 23. And then when you take your calculator out and you actually punch that in, you should get volume equals 1,840 centimeters. And because we're filling up the space, it's now cubed. That should be your final answer on the first problem on the I do slide. So not only are we going to talk about volume of rectangular prisms, we are also going to talk about the volume of a cylinder. So on the next slide, you're going to see a picture of just a plain cylinder. And this also has its own formula. So volume equals pi times the radius squared. That should look a lot like the area of a circle, but we're going to multiply it by its height. So again, this piece right here represents the area of the circle. And again, we have a circular base. And then we're multiplying that by the height going downward. One thing you might want to note about these is you need a radius when you're using this formula. So if you're given a diameter, you need to make sure that you divide that diameter by 2 so that you have the radius to plug into the formula. Let's look at an example here together. So in this cylinder, we have a height of 26 and we have a diameter of 14. So here is a great example for needing to find the radius. So if I divide 14 by 2, it tells me my radius is 7 feet, which is what I need for my formula. So if I write that formula down, volume equals pi r squared h. We're going to plug everything in. So volume equals 3.14 should always be used for pi. And then we have to square our radius. So I'm actually going to write it out. So instead of writing 7 squared, I'm going to write 7 times 7. That helps me remember that I'm squaring it by multiplying it by itself. And then I'm putting in my height of 26. You should be plugging this all into your calculator. So 3.14 times 7 times 7 times 26. And your final volume should be 4,036 feet and this is also cubed. So all volume measurements should be getting the feet cubed label. All right, so now what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and try to do these two volumes. So when you do that, remember volume equals length times width times height here, and volume equals pi r squared h here. So take a second to try both of these problems and put this video on pause because I'm going to go through them right here. So if I go through and I'm finding the volume of this rectangular prism, I'm going to locate the height, the width, and the length. So those are going into my formula. So I'm going to say volume equals 45 times 5 times 30. And you should have plugged that into your calculator. And when you do that, you get 6,750 meters cubed. I did notice on our pretest on this, a lot of people already knew what they were doing when it came to volume of rectangular prisms because the formula is so simple. So just make sure that you're checking your work when you use your calculators. Cylinders, again, a little more complicated because we have pi and the radius squared involved. So let's go ahead and identify all of my parts. So I can see right here that they've given me the radius here because it's only half the distance across the circle. And then I have the height right here. So this one should be pretty typical. Volume equals 3.14. I'm squaring 28 because that's my radius. So I'm going to do 28 times 28. And then my height is 60. Plugging that all into a calculator, 3.14 times 28 times 28 times 60. This is going to be a pretty big number. 147,705, and you could say 60 hundredths or cross out the 0 and it should be 6/10 inches cubed. And that's your final answer for the volume of this cylinder. So these are your two WeDo problems. If you're still looking through them to check your answers, make sure you plugged in the right numbers. The easiest thing that I did here is make sure you're identifying the correct length, width, and height on your prism and the correct radius and height on your cylinder. All right, moving on. And you can pause the video again and you can turn and talk to your neighbor. On these, we are going to need to draw a picture. So before you even start finding the volume, you should make sure you draw a picture because on a test or a quiz, you would get points for showing the representation. So go ahead and pause this, try and figure it out, and come back and you can listen to me go through the explanation. For this, we know it's a cube. And so when I draw a cube, I'm going to start with a face of a cube, which is a square, drawing it to the best of my ability. And then you kind of draw these lines going backward, and you make a cube going this way. As you can see, I'm not perfect at it either. You draw a line going down, and then you draw that other diagonal. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to look somewhat like a cube, and then you also need to make sure that you label it with 4.5 inches. And we know that squares have all the same sides, so you could put in these measurements lines to show that all sides are equal here. Then the next thing you would want to do is show that volume formula. Volume equals length times width times height. And because they're all the same, it's pretty simple. And I know this was referred to as a fraction, so I automatically changed it to a decimal since I like working with decimals better. So 4.5 times 4.5 times 4.5. And then punch that all into your calculator. And when you do that, you should get 91 and 125 thousandths, but it does say find it to the nearest cubic unit. So we would want to round to the nearest whole number, which would be equivalent to 91 inches cubed. The UDO problem is going to be pretty similar to this, except you're going to be drawing a cube. So let's go ahead and do that, and you can try this, pause the video, and then come back and check your work. So the first thing I'm going to draw is the cylinder. Cylinders always have circular bases, and then they're long, they have a height, and you kind of draw like a half little circle here, and you can always add in the dotted lines if you're getting specific. The two things you need are its diameter in this case and its height. So we know its height is its vertical measurement, and its diameter here is going all the way across. You can draw that center line, and that's going to be 7 feet. We insert our formula in, volume equals pi r squared h. So volume equals, pi is 3.14, but now I need my radius. So I need to come over here and say, okay, well 7 divided by 2 equals 3.5. So that is equivalent to my radius. So 3.5 times 3.5. And then my height is right here. So that's 4. And when I punch all of those numbers, lots of decimals into my calculator, I get 153 and 86 hundredths, and then feet cubes. It does say to the nearest cubic unit up here. So if I'm rounding that, I'm going to say 154 feet cubed as my final answer. All right, so if you need to, you can refer back to this video for any time that you're doing your independent classwork today, and then you can finish that up and submit that to Canvas.